Well, as far as the original judgment is concerned, the judgment was based on tenuous grounds because Maryam Nawaz and her father were convicted of possessing asset beyond means. And the Supreme Court has held that to establish or to convict a person for possessing assets beyond their means, four ingredients have to be fulfilled. The first one is that a person has to be a public office holder. Secondly, you have to establish the value of the assets that the person owns. Number three, you have to establish their income. You have to establish their known sources of means. Number three, you have to establish how their assets were beyond their means. So there has to be a causal link. Firstly, you establish that the value of their assets. Secondly, you establish their means, and then you establish how the two were disproportionate. So as far as the Avenfield judgment is concerned, you can see that the very first ingredient is missing because nowhere in the judgment did the accountability court establish or did the prosecution establish the value of the Avenfield apartments at the time when they were acquired. So as a result, you see that the four ingredients that the Supreme Court has held should be critical when establishing a charge for asset beyond means, the very first ingredient was missing. Secondly, the accountability court order, the judgment rendered by the accountability court, holds that Maryam Nawaz was instrumental in concealing the assets that her father had acquired. There is no evidence. The accountability court has not relied on any evidence as to how Maryam Nawaz was responsible for concealing such assets. Number three, and this is absolutely critical, that these assets were acquired in the early 1990s according to the accountability court judgment, but nowhere does the accountability court highlight what was Maryam Nawaz's role when these assets were acquired. And one more factor that's extremely important is that the Supreme Court, former Chief Justice Asif Said Khosa, in his judgment in the Ghani-ur-Rahman case, states that when a charge for asset beyond means is established, there has to be a link between the assets which have been acquired and between certain corrupt practices. So the accountability court judgment does not anywhere talk about the corrupt practices that were perpetuated or perpetrated by Maryam Nawaz. So as a result, Maryam Nawaz, it appeared, her involvement in the case was mainly due to the political considerations of the time. And we've seen that the Supreme Court of Pakistan, in a number of judgments, particularly in Khwaja Salman Rafiq's judgment, Justice Maqbool Bakr talks about how accountability laws in Pakistan have always been used to pursue certain political ends and how accountability courts have been used for political engineering. The legal position as far as this judgment is concerned, but I believe in Pakistan, in our particular context, you cannot understand these judgments unless you look at them with a political lens. So you cannot divorce the politics from the law over here. I think for the past few years, we've seen, and this is one of the critiques of our accountability regime, that the standard of proof in criminal proceedings, which is beyond reasonable doubt, has become eclipsed in the political tensions that have engulfed this country. So as far as the Islamabad High Court verdict is concerned, as I stated earlier, that it is well reasoned because throughout these proceedings, and we see that the earlier order whereby the conviction of Maryam Nawaz was suspended, Justice Athar Minallah and the Islamabad High Court at that point also argued, and it also highlighted how throughout the accountability court judgment, there was no discussion on the value of the assets that had been accumulated. So until the value of the assets which had been accumulated was determined, there was no way that the NAB could have established that the assets were beyond means. Secondly, the only evidence that was brought before the court to establish the value of these properties was an asset chart which had been prepared by an official of the NAB. But that official who had supposedly prepared that chart was not examined. He was not brought before the court. He could not be cross-examined. But the more critical question is that why could the prosecution not establish their case? Why could the prosecution not establish the value of these apartments? Why could the prosecution not establish the sources of income of the Sharif family and how the two were disproportionate? So as a result, cases and decisions cannot be announced on how we feel about certain people. One of the most important elements of our criminal justice system is due process. And you see how the accountability court and its judgment ran roughshod over the rights of the Sharif family and over their right to due process. And insofar as the Islamabad High Court has overturned their conviction, this is not just this judgment by the Islamabad High Court does not merely exonerate Maryam Nawaz Sharif, but I think the more critical question over here is that this judgment indicts NAB and it indicts all those who were responsible, who were at the helm of the accountability regime for the last 4 or 5 years. All important decisions that have been rendered by our courts throughout our legal and jurisprudential history have been influenced by the politics of the day. So I think it's interesting to see that Maryam Nawaz was only acquitted after her party came into power, but this acquittal could not happen in the 4 years when her party was in the opposition and when her party was not really on the good side of the powerful forces of this country. So I think it's perhaps also important to see how accountability laws in Pakistan have been designed to victimize political parties and how accountability laws in Pakistan have been designed to achieve certain political ends.